Big breaking TV. Welcome prime time, bitch.
Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters, and welcome back to episode 3 of The Last of Us. This one entitled, I didn't get the title, so I will have to double check that, but
I think
it'll
it's
be
like
on the
long
thumbnail.
time or
Something like that. But either way, this was definitely one that I was looking forward to because we get to meet the character of Bill, which I gotta say, as again somebody who has played the games, I know Luke, that you have not. This is very different than the games. This is quite a departure, I would say, from what actually happens in the game, and I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I thought this was a very emotionally resonant episode. There's definitely a lot more that you get into Bill as a person. A lot of things that were only hinted in the game are further expounded upon. And it's one of those things where it's like the time we get to spend with him just to see this little slice of normalcy in this crazy world, and how he interacts with these characters. I loved it. I love this being a more quiet episode, especially since the last episode felt very much like a mission from the video games.
Just quick question, since this is a departure and I know nothing about the video game at all, really. So is Bill more of a current character in the situation? Or
yes, in a sense of like he is a character that of course they go to because he has this town, this compound, that's all his. He was a survivalist, a prepper, and all that. His partner or husband was only ever alluded to. He talked about him a lot in a very loving, caring way, but they were never outright like, oh, I'm gay or whatever. He never was like, fully open about that. So it's like something that's been pretty speculated on. But we can all kind of see how it goes in the game. But it just made sense. And it's one of those things where this character, you actually go on a mission with him. You do stuff with him to basically get yourselves a car, which is what they end up getting at the end of the episode. But in that mission, you have to go get car parts and fight the undead and all that. So I see why they took this approach.
So you would say that this episode was a lot of creative liberty, correct? Okay,
very much.
Because I'm gonna say I absolutely love this episode. I thought it was fantastic. And this is where I've talked about it, I think in the last 2 episodes that we've done this, that I feel like The Last of Us has its own unique voice. It's not replicating something that's been done before. You look at the concept and you're like, man, maybe it's similar to a lot of other things, but no, Last of Us really has its own voice here. And I think spending time with Bill and Frank, I believe, right?
Yeah, Frank.
I think this episode, different tone. We're dealing more with a human relationship here, with elements of everything else that's going on bleeding into their little compound, but very much a human story here, and just a relationship that is built between 2 characters, and I loved it. And it's very hard to do. This was what I think the runtime was maybe an hour 20, but I think it cuts
was,
out a little early before it gets to that hour 20 mark. And to make you feel for the characters the way that they did in just this short amount of time, I mean, perfect writing. This was great acting, great writing. I really enjoyed this episode a lot.
Yeah, and I could see people maybe later on down the road calling this more of a filler episode. I don't necessarily feel that way. I think that it's a really great dissection of just, again, relationships in the apocalypse, and also not just talking like sexual actual relationship. I'm talking just like with people in general, because Bill, they show that he's on his own for like 3-4 years, I think it was, before Frank even shows up. So for him to gain that trust and to see the evolution of their characters, and then how they come to meet Joel and Tess and all this stuff, it's all really wonderful stuff. Again, one of my favorite aspects of the show is just we're really expanding on this show. We're really moving forward, and we're constantly saying, we have these great characters. Why don't we just kind of dive a little bit deeper into them? And I really like the guts that this show is showing with that. I think that this has all been really smart and really fun. And although a much slower episode than the last 2, I think that this was very, very impactful. It had my interest the entire time. And when there was some action, we got to admit that fence raid was
Yeah.
pretty fucking cool. Like, I loved seeing all the traps go off and everything, because Bill is one of those characters that teaches you how to make like things like nail bombs and stuff in the game. So it's like he does use those survivalist kind of trapper, trapping things, as we saw in the episode. I love that they put that on full display.
And me not really knowing too much about the Bill character at all, and we kind of get it set up a little bit as the military's moving out with everybody in the town, and he's kind of just left by himself. And I actually verbalized as he was down, as he was coming up, I'd be like, man, if I was left there, I'd just be raiding everyone's houses and supermarkets and getting everything. And I love that they have a character that's smart enough to actually go do that. And I love that little montage of him going everywhere, getting gas and everything like that, and getting really set up. I thought it was just a smart play, and it makes you instantly love that character. And then as soon as Frank is introduced, you kind of have that tension of how is this going to play out? Are there other motives here? And then it just gets into this very human story, and it's like, yeah, we don't get as much action as we maybe are anticipating, but the level of emotion and storytelling that we do get here, I think, is something where, reflecting back on this season, I think we're going to still be talking about this episode, because when they sit down for that dinner the first time, and then we circle back and it's the last dinner that they have together, and it's the same dinner. I mean, that for me, I felt that emotion. You know what I mean?
It reminded me very much of, oddly, especially how they placed it and everything, of Pig with Nicolas Cage.
Yes.
Yeah, I had a
Yep.
lot of those vibes with just the way it was, the color palette and the way they were serving the meals and everything.
And again, it
And
was
all
just
the beards. So
yeah. It's so well done, and it's like, a little bit slower than we're used to, but I think they really did fill this one with they turned up the emotion level to a 10 here, and it's like, this is an episode that's I'm gonna go back and watch again, just because I think it's great in the realm of storytelling.
Yeah, and I like the kind of spread that we've gotten so far with only 3 episodes in, of having kind of like the emotional opener that everybody kind of has to rip the band-aid off of,
Yeah.
and deal with the Sarah death and everything, and really get into Joel's corner. And then we kind of go into more of an action focused episode, where you really get, like I said, that sense of the video game of just going and clearing buildings and walking your way through cities and towns. And then now we're dealing with more of a character piece, because even outside of the Frank and Bill stuff, which is probably about 90-80% of the episode, the moments between Joel and Ellie, especially leading up to the flashback, where he's like, oh, I don't want you to see this, and it's the mass grave and everything like that. It is just really leaning on where humanity is at this point in time, and just kind of like, how do you get through the day to day? Like, how do you trust people in this world? The atrocities that surround them at every corner, even the ones that aren't happening physically right in front of them, but they're past, and just how it's just all laid out there. It's crazy. And, I love the attention to detail in the show with Ellie. They do it in the game too, where they talk about, firsts for a lot of things. Like, she's never been on an airplane.
Yeah.
So it's just like, that's a really great conversation piece. And then I also really enjoyed the her getting into the car and him saying seatbelt, and she didn't know what the hell it was. So it's just like, it's all really puts you in that perspective of like, damn, she's never lived a day in our lifetime of what we get on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I think, because a lot of us, well, everyone's seeing it really through the lens of Joel, just because he lived in the time that we did. So it's like, even in the previous episode, we're at the hotel, and she's not, she's saying the stuff that they would do as if Joel didn't know what they did, but he actually lived through it. And I love that the dynamic that they bring to those characters. And you were talking about like the plane and the mass grave. It's like, we've been flooded with so many intense images throughout this, these first few episodes. I mean, with the crashed plane in the field, I thought was absolutely, it just sticks with you in your head. And then when we go to the mass grave and they focus in on the blanket, and then we kind of do the flashback to the baby wrapped in the blanket, it's just like so many intense things going on here that they make every scene in this count. It's like, I know you mentioned where it's like, people could say this was a filler episode, but for me, it's like really nothing in any of these 3 episodes ever screamed filler for me, because it's like they're just building the foundation here so that, when we strip it so much away and we're really dealing into the action in the element of the here and now. It's like we have so much backstory to all these characters and so much connective tissue that it's going to mean that much more. And it's like this relationship that they're building with Joel and Ellie is just something that I'm here for every week. And it's just even going to the tail end of the episode, and it's like putting yourself in Joel's shoes, where we just lost Tess, and then he's going to go find Frank and Bill, and then he gets there and he finds the notes, and it's like it's already happened, it's
And again, that
done.
doesn't happen in the game. You meet Bill, you work with Bill, you hang out with him, and it's really only through their conversations that you understand about things like Frank and stuff. So, that was why, like last week, I said I'm excited to really dive into those two characters, because on one hand, it was interesting to me when I found out months ago that Frank was even going to be in the show. I was just looking through the cast list and saw it, and I thought, okay, it might be a flashback. I didn't think it was going to be this.
Yeah.
And, when we saw the trailer and I saw the actor who's playing him, who was in it quite a bit, I was just like, okay, so maybe they will be expounding upon this. Maybe Frank will still be around, things like that. But I love how they explored it. I love the dynamic. And I mean, Nick Offerman was perfect casting. It sucks that it's only going to be one episode, because I thought maybe that was a character, if the show was going to take anybody from the first game to kind of expand upon, because they have this really, I mean, you see it a little bit at like the dinner table, but Joel and him have this kind of understanding, but throughout their interactions they're just constantly giving each other shit, but they kind of realize that they're cut from the same cloth and everything. And that's why those final words in the note are so impactful, especially if you've played the game, because it's basically, I think it's, if not exact, it kind of paraphrases one of the last conversations Bill has with them before they move on. Because Bill doesn't die in the game. As far as we know, he's still in his town doing his thing.
And see, and me being a little selfish, I wanted Nick Offerman for at least a little bit longer, because like looking at the episodes, and I knew I'd seen some articles out there explaining who Bill and Frank were. I didn't read any of those articles. I just assumed that they were going to be characters that were going to be here maybe for a few more than just one episode. So I thought we were going to at least get Nick Offerman. And as we were progressing through the episode and we were kind of getting, where Frank was laying out the terms, I was like, okay, so this will be interesting to kind of see Bill and Joel meet up after both losing their significant others. And I thought that's where they were going to go with. And then I was like, as soon as we get to the dinner scene, we kind of lay out, the fate of,
I was
of both
just like,
Bill and Frank. I was like, whoa, okay. So
this is very emotionally different, but is satisfying than the game. It's one of those things where I definitely see some people are going to hate this and some people are going to love it. I really thought it was solid. I like learning more about these characters and, learning more about this world. It's like, this is what TV shows are for, fleshing out stories. So,
yeah. And I mean, especially in these instances like this, where all you really have left are human relationships. So it's like, getting as much of that human story as we can in this setting, I think is the most interesting part, because, we move on from Bill and Frank and now we're still with Joel and Ellie. And it's like, I'm curious to see where that's going to lead, them leaving the compound and getting out on the road with the truck and everything like that. And I just want to say how smart was it, of course, in total Bill fashion, that he had the battery disassembled and preserved. I thought was just fantastic. So I'm really excited to see what the next episode. I mean, this is becoming a reoccurring theme. I haven't been cold on any of these episodes thus far, so I'm really intrigued to see what episode 4 is going to do.
I'm excited for you to see it as well. But that's going to basically wrap up our thoughts on the episode. I did want to mention real quick. So it was confirmed for season 2. So congratulations to the Last of Us team. You're getting a season 2. It was also confirmed, which was something that's kind of been up in the air, and I brought up a bunch of times when we talked about this and in the first episode, that they are going to be following the storyline of Last of Us Part 2 in season 2. Which does rack my brain with a million questions, because obviously I think we can say that by the end of these, 9-10 episodes, that this is going to conclude the first game. But then we get into 2, which is a very controversial game. I think it's a masterpiece. Like I've said it 100 times, I absolutely adore 2. I'm actually one of the few in the camp that prefers 2 over 1. So I'm excited to see that adapted, but it does kind of leave me questioning how many seasons of the show we're actually going to get. Because as far as we know, the 3rd game is on the horizon to be announced soon. And yeah, I'm just really curious to see what's going to happen. Because I would hate to have like a Game of Thrones situation where the show, even though it is from Neil Druckmann, the director and creator of the game, kind of outpacing the games. I don't know. It feels like that could be a slippery slope.
I mean, did they say verbatim we're gonna get what exactly happens in the
Yes,
second
they
game?
said that it will be following the story of season of
Because I
Last
know
of Us Part
something
2.
pretty big happens in that second game, I believe. Correct?
Yes, something very big and detrimental and interesting happens very early on. So, I'm keeping it vague. I mean, a lot of you have probably played the game and you know what's going on, but yeah, just let's keep it vague. Don't spoil anything in the comments for anybody who's just experiencing this show, for the first time. I don't want anybody to spoil that, but
I
yeah.
guess for me, I'm intrigued to see if they're gonna stick with that, or are they gonna just pluck out certain things and kind of pace it.
That would
Um,
be insane if they change that. I mean, like, I'm here for it, but like, yeah, that's one of those things where it's kind of like it would be tough. I guess they could do it, but like it would be very tough to get around that because it's kind of the whole crux of the emotional core of that game.
because
So
like I guess for me, I'm intrigued to see what happens because since you're telling me that this episode here was very
very true.
creatively, there were a lot of liberties taken, and it was more so the brainchild of the writing, Craig Mazin. I'd be intrigued to see them kind of either pace that out, or even if you get past the second game in season 2, I don't know. I think there would be a dynamic change, but I would be intrigued to see if they went on for later seasons. This became almost just a unique kind of franchise in terms of, yes, the game still exists. We're getting part 3, but it's going to be completely different than the show that we're getting in it. The show becomes very much its own thing. I don't know. I'd be intrigued. I think at least the writing coming off episode 3, I'd be excited to see it. I don't know. Maybe we take a real hard turn eventually, but right now, I wouldn't be opposed.
I think that there are ways to do it. They're showing that they, with the creative liberties they're taking, that they seem to be working. Again, I don't think it's going to work for a lot of people, or not a lot of people, but a good majority of people. I will probably see complain about how they handled this episode because it does pull away from the central action, and I know some people that's kind of all they're here for. But to me, this was very emotionally resonant, and yeah, I think you're right. If they can if they have the confidence to adapt the story in a different way, I think that would honestly, a lot of people who were upset with Last of Us 2, I think that would honestly be a smart play to
Yeah.
kind of have that alternate look. And that would really throw people off who've played the games. And just to be like, well, now I don't know how this is going to work because it's insane. So I would be down. I would
Yeah.
be interested.
And I think that's really honestly where you need to be, because
Mhm.
there has to be a reason for the show. It can't be verbatim game beat by beat by beat. There has to be a reason for the show to exist, or else I would
Yeah.
just play the video game.
It
So it's
would
like,
be it would be nice to have this one be a closer, more like they're doing a more faithful adaptation, and then 2 they take a lot of liberties with because 2 is so controversial. Now that you've kind of interplayed that in my mind, I think that that could be what they do.
yeah. So
Genuinely.
I'm intrigued, because like for me, I know you've played both games, so you kind of know a lot of where the story's going and everything. For me, I'm a didn't really play the games, casual in terms of what beats I do know of everything. So I'm out in the field just wandering around, seeing where The Last of Us is gonna take us. So like if we get to the point where the hardcore gamers don't know either, and they come and join me in that field, and we're all experiencing everything new, I think that'd be a fun experience for everybody.
Absolutely. But alrighty, guys, it's going to wrap us up here for our Prime Time Terrors on The Last of Us Episode 3. So definitely, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and follow us for all the great horror content we're bringing to the channel. We've got a lot of good stuff up right now. We've got reviews for all of the latest horror flicks like Infinity Pool, Skinamarink, even Megan earlier this month, as well as an interview with director Kyle Edward Ball, just up on the channel now, and our previous episodes reviewing Last of Us Episode 1 and 2. So definitely, if you're new here, get caught up on that stuff. It's all good content. And if you're returning, thank you for checking us out. And yeah, we have more on the way this week. So definitely keep your eyes peeled and yeah, keep checking the subscription feed. So until next time, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.